students, in this video we're going to be learning about the eyes. Now your eyes are connected to your skull by 6 precisely controlled extrinsic eye muscles whose sole function is to position the back of your eyeball on the object that you're looking at. These muscles rotate your eyeballs in your eye sockets in 3 planes, like 2 satellite dishes honing in on a signal, giving us a field of vision that sweeps across almost 180 degrees in a panoramic view and about 130 degrees from top to bottom. So let's get into the nitty-gritty work of learning about the structures that make up the eye that enables us to have such an incredibly specialized visual sense. I'll be naming some of the structures that I feel are most important to your understanding of the eye and how the eye works, and then we'll be looking just a little bit at the neurophysiology of the conversion of light energy into an image. So let's start by naming the visible eye structures. The white of the eye is the sclera, which is covered by a thin mucous membrane called the conjunctiva. And the colored part of the eye is the iris, and the black center is the pupil. And not easy to see in this view is the transparent convex cornea that overlies the iris and the pupil. It is easier to pick up in a side view. Not observed externally is the accessory eye structure called the lacrimal apparatus that consists of the lacrimal gland located in the upper lateral area of the eyeball and the medially located lacrimal sac and nasolacrimal duct. It is a lacrimal gland that produces the dilute saline solution that we call tears that bathes the eyeball. Let's now switch our attention to the internal structures of the eye, beginning with the 3 layers or tunics that make up all of its structures. The outermost layer of the eye has 2 parts to it. It has a tough outer fibrous coat called the sclera, which makes up the white of the eye, and anteriorly the coat is modified into the transparent convex structure called the cornea. Now the middle layer or tunic is called the uvea. Uvea has several aspects to it. Beginning posteriorly, the uvea is highly vascularized and pigmented and called the choroid. Anteriorly, the uvea is modified into 2 very distinct structures, the ciliary body and the iris. Both the ciliary body and the iris are made up of smooth muscle, the structure of which I will go into more detail later on in the video. The innermost layer of the eye is the retina. The retina contains the neural tissue, and this is the business end of the eye. Here we find the photoreceptors that converts light waves into electrical signals. We will look at this layer in greater detail as well. Another structure of great importance is the lens, which is located just posteriorly to the iris. The lens is held in place by the suspensory ligaments, which are attached to the ciliary body. The lens separates the eyeball into an anterior and posterior segment. The anterior segment is filled with a watery fluid called the aqueous humor, and the posterior segment is filled with a gel-like substance called the vitreous humor. Now that we have named some of the main components of the eye, let's take a look at how the eye produces an image. So how does light reflected off of an object become an image in our brain? Well, light waves are reflected from an image and are traveling in all directions. The waves that reach our eyes and hit the photoreceptors in the retina will contribute to the formation of the image. The shape of the eye gives us insight into how it functions. As mentioned previously, the eyeball functions much like a satellite dish, scanning the scene, funneling the light waves that are traveling toward it. The first object that this light will hit is the convex transparent cornea. Any light traveling through the cornea at an angle other than a right angle will be bent toward the center. This function is very important so that all of the light can be focused toward the central portion of the back of the eye at a single point called the focal point. This bending of light rays is called refraction. The shape of the cornea is fixed so that it always has the same effect on the light. A cornea, or a lens for that matter, that has unequal curvatures in different parts may cause blurred images. This is called astigmatism. As light rays are bent by the cornea and converge toward a central point, they enter the eyeball through the pupil and are further bent by the convexity of the lens. Unlike the cornea, which has a single convexity toward the anterior, the lens is biconvex, so upon exiting the lens the light is bent for the third time, further focusing the light at the back of the eye, and again at a focal point. Where this focal point hits is extremely important and will make the difference between a clear image and a blurry one. Let's look further now at the retina to understand why the central point at the back of the eyeball is so important. The retina is made up of a neural layer and a pigmented layer. The neural layer is made up of specialized neurons that are stacked in a lineup with the photoreceptors as the outermost part of this layer. The middle cell layer are the bipolar cells, and the innermost layer is the ganglion cells, whose processes form the optic nerve. Light entering the eye must pass through each cell layer before getting absorbed by a photoreceptor, and any light that is not absorbed by a photoreceptor is absorbed by the pigmented layer to prevent scatter of light. These photoreceptors are the rods and the cones. Now, rods are very sensitive to light, so they are ideal for night vision and peripheral vision, but they have only a single pigment, and they sense only gray tones. Whereas cones need a strong light source for activation, but they have 3 different pigments, giving the ability to sense colors. Cones are what give images their greatest detail and give us the greatest visual acuity. The cones are most densely concentrated at the most central point of the retina at the back of the eye. This area of the retina looks different than the rest and appears pitted. It is given the name fovea centralis, which literally means central pit. Surrounding the fovea is the macula lutea, which is also highly concentrated with cones. A unique feature of this area of the retina is that the axons coming from the ganglion cells and the blood vessels are directed around the macula and fovea and are not allowed to pass through them. If we look to the right of the macula, we can see a structure that appears white or yellow with blood vessels going through it. This area is the optic disc, which is the appearance of the optic nerve from inside the eye. The area of the optic disc is the point at which all of the axons of the ganglion cells exit the eye, forming the nerve, and the point where the blood vessels enter and exit the eye. This area is the blind spot. This image of the retina was taken during a fundoscopic examination. A fundoscopic exam is very often done using an ophthalmoscope. The fundoscopic exam is an extremely invaluable tool in the early detection of numerous diseases that will show up in the eye well before symptoms develop. This video has been an introduction to the main components of the eye that work together to produce signals that will be perceived by your brain as an image. Our next video will look at how our eyes adapt to various conditions to assure that you are always focusing the object of your gaze at the point of greatest acuity, the fovea centralis. We will also briefly describe the process of phototransduction that translates light energy into electrical signals. And lastly, we will finish up with some of the problems that can develop with our eyes and vision and how they are corrected.